Welcome back to After Hours. Well, real estate development giant Hines is a real heavy hitter sporting a $23 billion property portfolio of over 1,000 buildings across 100 cities around the world. And it's making a big move into Canada, announcing a major Toronto waterfront deal today. Is the timing right? And how is Canadian commercial real estate holding up compared to the U.S.? We're joined by Avi Tesciuba, who is heading up Hines' expansion into Canada. Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So let's start off with this project. It's really quite interesting. A mixed-use, residential, commercial. Tell us about it.
Sure. So it's about a 2 million square feet development on about 10 acres on the waterfront, south of Queens Quay, between Sherbourne and Parliament.
Okay.
About, roughly speaking, 70% of it is going to be residential, about 20% office, and the balance retail and cultural. So it's going to be a truly mixed-use facility. And vibrant 24/7, so you don't have just offices active during the day or residential active at night and weekends. It's going to be vibrant 24/7, around the clock, and weekends.
Seems very ambitious, about $800 million price tag, if I'm correct. How common are these type of mixed-use kind of holistic projects, and how difficult are they to bring into development?
They're not so common, and they're pretty challenging. We consider in our profession to be kind of the ultimate form of art of development, because they're typically phased. There's too much development to do all at once. And so you have to, one, time each phase correctly, and the use. What use do you put in first? Residential, office, retail? So it's quite challenging to get it right. A lot of them fail. One, because of scale, and two, because of phasing costs. You have to put in a lot of infrastructure early on, which affects your yield. So they're tricky to pull off, but we've done a number of them successfully in the past in a number of other cities across the globe. Diagonal del Mar in Barcelona, in Shanghai, in Milan. So we're very hopeful that we'll have a great success here as well.
Okay, and why did you think the time was right to come in and do this, considering, I mean, the real estate market in Canada, I mean, obviously it's fared better than the United States, but we've seen sales decline, and people are projecting that prices will decline a little bit too. Commercial's doing better. I mean, what's your forecast for how do you see the Canadian real estate market?
You know, there was a report recently that July fared much worse than June, and July fared much worse than July of last year. That is a very short-term view. We look at this development really over the long term. We think the first development, first of all, the first phase, isn't going to start construction probably for another 2 years. So it's not something we're trying to get done next week. And the overall development, all phases, are probably going to take the better part of a decade. So you can't look at a development of that scale and look at what just happened last quarter. This is really a long-term view, and typically for the long-term projects of that scale that are truly iconic typically always do better than the marketplace at large. So we don't focus on short-term. We're a private company, so we're not rated by analysts thinking about what's going to happen next quarter. We very much have a long-term view. Our partners do. It's a privately held company, and we're very positive, enthusiastic about Toronto. We think Toronto is a great place to invest, and are very positive about the outlook on this project.
And you're also in Calgary, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Right, with the 8th Avenue place, which is currently in the midst of being built.
Correct. Close to completion, actually. The first tenants will move in 3 months.
Okay, and so what's the sense in terms of occupancy and the kind of prices you're getting there? How, I mean, as a litmus for the health of the sector?
You know, the last year probably had been slow, both in terms of leasing activity and in terms of pricing, and it's rebounded. Not atypical for Calgary, but it is now vibrant. There's a lot more activity. Prices have started, not just for our building, but generally in the marketplace in Calgary, have started going up. So that market is definitely coming back.
Okay, now you've just come up from the States, I understand. How does that compare to what's happening in the States? There's been some recent numbers out by Moody's that show that prices fell the most in June for commercial real estate in a year.
So the mood in the U.S. is still pretty negative. It's, I think, beginning to turn a corner. It's done that a lot faster and a lot earlier here. But in the U.S. generally, it's still negative. Here, it feels like the dip was very short-lived and not much of a dip either. So generally for my partners in the U.S. looking at Canada, Canada feels like the place to be, a place to invest. The dip has been barely felt. But the U.S. I think is slowly turning around.
Do you plan on, I mean, I think it's 3 properties in Canada now altogether, or do you have plans to have a bigger footprint in the country?
That's absolutely the intent. Canada for us is a great place to invest. Toronto, out of Canada, is the city to be in. It's driven by the economy, the demographics. 43% of all immigrants to Canada move to Toronto. So it makes Toronto really a vibrant hub. So our intent is fully to try to grow our presence here. And this, we think, is a milestone, landmark project to do that with.
And just one last question, going back to the States again. I remember months ago everybody expecting some really massive defaults and foreclosures, particularly in the commercial real estate. We did see some, but maybe not to the extent that people expected. Is that because the market is going to be pulling itself out, or is there still a bottom we might be seeing?
A lot of bankruptcies were expected. There's a term we've seen a lot in the U.S. called blend and pretend. A lot of lenders have said, well, I could default this borrower because technically they're in default, but what's my alternative? If I default this borrower, who is going to make these payments instead? And so lenders, for the most part, instead of defaulting their borrowers, have just blended their loan terms and extended it, effectively pushing away the problem. But we haven't seen many of these bankruptcies, and we don't see them coming. Although the problem is not over, for now we're not seeing it.
Okay, well, Avi, thank you very much for being here, and good luck on this project.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
That was Avi Tesciuba. He is head of Canadian operations for Hines.